Hey guys, welcome to section 3.3 called Completing the Square. You're going to watch two videos tonight. The first one is our investigation. What is completing the square? So once we've done this investigation, we'll actually get to our learning target, which is I can solve quadratic equations by completing the square. So below are three perfect square trinomials. Factor each expression. Now we should be really good at factoring perfect square trinomials, but I'm going to go a little slow with letter A and then a little quicker with B and C. So in letter A, I have x squared plus 14x plus 49. Remember, if we just want to factor this in general, we ask ourselves, what factors of 49 add to 14? And that we should easily know that 7 times 7 gives us 49, and 7 plus 7 gives us 14. So I have the same factor twice, which means I could write it as x plus 7 quantity squared. So we call that a binomial squared. Remember, a binomial is two terms, okay? So I'll use that term quite a bit today. My next perfect square trinomial is x squared minus 16x plus 64. My perfect square at the end is 64. Remember, they're called perfect square trinomials because the first term and the last term are perfect squares, and thus it gives us a nice, easy way to factor. We should remember that our factors are always identical. So what multiplies to positive 64 and adds to negative 16 would be x minus 8 times x minus 8. But we would write that as x minus 8 quantity squared. So I hope your memory is jogged on how to factor perfect square trinomials. For this last one, we have x squared plus 12x plus 36. So all we really need to do is take the square root of 36, plop it in my factor, x plus 6 quantity squared. Okay, so I hope we remember that when we factor a perfect square trinomial, it turns into a binomial squared. Okay, but let's investigate further how all these numbers are related. That's what this reflect says. What relationships do you see with the numbers in the standard form expression and the numbers in the factored form expression? Actually, there's just one number in the factored form expression, but that's okay. So let's look here. In letter A, the number in my factored form is 7. The relationship between 7 and the numbers in the standard form is that 7 is the square root of 49, right? And 7 is half of 14. Does that hold true for B, negative 8? Sure does. Well, negative 8 can be the square root of 64, and negative 8 is half of negative 16. And also, 6 is the square root of 36, and it is half of 12. So here's our relationship. The number in the factored form, the number in the factor is half of B, remember that's the coefficient of the x term, and the square root of C. And if that is true, that means that if I take half of B, let me just write this, that's B divided by 2, and square it, I should get C. So if I come back up here, looking at A, 14, that's B divided by 2, 7 squared, 49. Yep. Letter B, negative 16 divided by 2, negative 8 squared, 64. And C, 12 divided by 2, 6 squared is 36. So right there, that's what we need to think about when I'm telling you or asking you to complete the square. When I say complete the square, I'm like trying to say, hey, make this a perfect square trinomial. So what we just figured out is in standard form, I have x squared plus bx plus c, right? But what that is we found that c is equivalent to half of b squared. And then in factored form, remember what was in here was just half of b. So we'll put b over 2. So let's complete the square. Complete the square by filling in the blank, then write each expression as a binomial square. So just like standard form and factored form. So what I do here, a, x squared plus 8x plus what would be my perfect square that would fill this in? Well, we have to take half of b. So 8 divided by 4 So b over 2, sorry, 8 divided by 2 gives us 4. And then when I square that, that would be 16. So the number I'd put here to make that a perfect square trinomial is 16. But this b over 2 is what goes in my factor. That would be x plus 4 quantity squared. Again, that's also the square root of that number. So however you want to think about it. In letter B, x squared plus 2x plus, well, we divide 2 by 2, which is 1. And 1 squared is 1. So we put that there. The factor is x plus half of b, which is 1, quantity squared. In letter C, I take 12 divided by 2, well, negative 12. And that's negative 6. If I square that, I get 36. And my factor then would be x minus, because I have a negative b term, 6, quantity squared. X squared minus 10x, divide negative 10x by 2. That's negative 5. When I square negative 5, I get 25. And my factor then would be x minus 5, quantity squared. Now those were all nice numbers. And last two I'm going to give you fractions, but have no fear, fractions are easy to square. So b over 2 in letter E, my b is 7, so it's 7 halves. But b over 2 squared, all you have to do is square that fraction, which means you square the top and square the bottom. So 7 halves squared is 49 fourths. Okay, but in your factor, remember you just do the b over 2. So it's x plus 7 halves quantity squared. So this goes in your factor, the squared goes in your trinomial. And finally, letter F. I'm going to divide negative 13 by 2. So my b over 2 is a negative 13 halves. When I square that, that's negative 13 over 2 squared. Negative 13 squared is 169, and 2 squared is 4. So that's 169 fourths, and my factor is x minus 13 halves quantity squared. Okay, that is the end of this video.